What is the book of Malachi? Well, Malachi was written by an individual named Malachi, although there is controversy as to whether this was a pseudonym for Ezra. It was written very late into the 5th century BC, and the significance of the title is actually important. When we note the name Malachi, it would be the essential equivalent in English of my angel or my messenger. And again, a messenger isn't a description of what they are, it's what they do. Like any prophet of God, them communicating this message would be their responsibility. And Malachi's prophecies, while rumored to be another name for Ezra, would not necessarily be the case because, again, the standard of a prophet didn't tolerate secret names or pseudonyms. He would have been his own man and would have to have taken accountability for his writings in the Jewish culture that he was speaking to. The background of this book is important because following the conclusion of the events in the book of Nehemiah, the reconstruction of the temple, Jerusalem's wall, Israel as a nation, they've all started to get their bearings again. And this last note of new information were mainly reminders of the promises yet to be fulfilled and the terms of their covenant with God that they were already beginning to neglect. Messiah was still coming, and they would need this last note of preparation before his arrival. Now, this doesn't mean that God never spoke during this time period. We see in the accounts of the Gospel of Luke that there were still prophets and prophetesses, male and female spokesmen for God, but they were repeating new and, of course, old information as well in order to make sure that they had this complete record of what they needed to know about the nature and character of God. And the reason why Malachi was able to put forward new information regarding the nature of God was because he passed the standard of a prophet of God. The requirement for him to be consistent with the nature of God and accurate in the information he provided was easy, since the majority of it was just reminding them what was already written. Mainly historical references to events in Ezra, Nehemiah, as well as their covenant in Deuteronomy. His predictions of the future of Elijah forerunning the Messiah's return was, again, a reference to Isaiah anyway, but what makes Malachi important is the explicit condemnation of spousal abuse in the New Testament philosophy of not only how marriage ought to be done, but also that giving should be something done out of joy rather than out of obligation. It's an extremely important source of the consistency of God's character so that we know who we're dealing with and how to recognize God when he finally shows up in the person of Jesus Christ. And it's also worth noting that while there is controversy about the author of Malachi, it is an important point about why Jewish culture is and remains our authority on how what we judge is and isn't Scripture. The traditions of ancient Judaism, Second Temple Judaism as it's known, do report and recognize Malachi as a legitimate prophet of God. It's also by those same traditions that other books that were written after the time of Malachi, Tobit, 1st through 5th Enoch, Esdras, what are known today as the Apocrypha, since they, of course, were not written by the authors that reported them, got doctrinal statements and factual historical statements wrong. These were all the standards that not just the authors of the Old Testament, but the New were also held to. And it's also noting as well that transparency about problems and putting forward our standards as fair or self-defeating all come from the Old Testament and the Jewish culture that revealed it. It doesn't mean that Israel is infallible, but it does mean that we know where our rules came from and why we consider them worth concluding this information came from God. So Malachi, along with the 38 books of the Old Testament that came before it, continues the pattern of dependability, consistency, reliability, and accountability that we will also see going into the New Testament. That's the book of Malachi.